What if the problem isn't you? What if you're in the wrong room? My suspicion? You're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. You have outgrown where you are. Let's get more space and freedom to redesign the life you deserve. Welcome to the Reinvention Room. I'm Allison Hare, coach for ambitious women making big changes, and we are rethinking everything we've been taught. Part pop culture, part real talk, and all smarter ways to live life on your own terms. You ever feel like you are doing everything right, climbing the ladder, checking the boxes, but somehow you've become invisible? Or maybe just as bad, complacent. Like you could walk into a meeting, drop the most brilliant idea of your career, and still get talked over by some guy named Chad who just rephrased what you just said. If that hit a nerve, stick around. My guest today is the lively, fun, and delightfully impressive Erin Hatzikostas, a former CEO turned executive coach, the best-selling author of the books 50% Rule and You Do You-ish, and host of Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck. Today's episode is going to be like, I can't wait for you to hear this. It's going to be like a big old permission slip for you to do things your way and win at work. We are getting into a few really exciting things. Why playing it safe might be keeping you stuck, and the real secret behind standing out in a sea of sameness, and why taking back control of your career starts with breaking a few rules. One of my favorite things ever. I can't wait for Erin to tell you about the 50% rule because this completely changed everything for me. And honestly, if I had known this while I was in corporate America, and even now, I wonder if I would have ever left because it would have made everything better. If you've ever felt stuck in the shadows at work or feel like you've been kicking butt at work, but still not feel like you're in the right lane, I need you to listen all the way through this episode because there are nothing but light bulbs the entire time. Let's talk to Erin Hatzikostas about the 50% rule. Okay, I am so excited to welcome Erin Hatzikostas. I'm going to pronounce this right.
Beautiful.
Erin Hatzikostas.
Erin H.
Erin H.
Hatzikostas is how we say it in the U.S. Hatzikosta is how they say it in the Mediterranean. And honestly, anything else is totally fine.
Yes. Well, thank you for unbutchering the job that I did. Welcome to the Reinvention Room. I'm so glad that you're here.
I love being in this room. I love the freaking name. Let's reinvent some stuff now.
Well, we have a lot of listeners to this podcast that are working corporate jobs. They have done everything that they were told to do. They've gotten the big titles. They are working their asses off, but they're not feeling fulfilled. And I thought, what a perfect way to have you on of what if you don't have to burn it down and just burn everything to the ground and start over? But what if there was a way to kind of flip it to double down on where you are and make it fun, make it fulfilling, make it meaningful, make it purposeful, productive, all of the things that you want to have to be inspired again by your own job. And so would you help us? You've just released a new book called 50% Rule. I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with this idea. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is the 50% rule?
The 50% rule is super simple on the surface. It essentially says anytime you're doing something new or getting advice, listening to a podcast, like listening to me, blah, 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 listening to a mentor, getting a playbook of how things are done, only take about half, about 50%. Purposely slide aside the stuff that makes you feel icky or feels overwhelming or feels crusty and old, or you just don't want to do it. Instead, look at the intent, get rid of that half, and then use that room to bring in your own ideas, your fresh perspective, mash together something you've seen elsewhere. And I think it's helpful, to tell the story of how it started, because it actually started, when you hear that, it's a very one, it's like a duh. I mean, some people are like, oh, that's what I do all the time. And then I go,
Uh-huh.
actually, no, you don't. And I can tell you this because I wrote the damn book on it. And still, while I was writing the book, I was getting stuck on stuff that I should have been 50% ruling. So you do, I mean, everybody does this to some extent, right? But one, I put a name behind it. So it's now this more actionable thing. But two, so often you forget to do it. So for me, it started really as a self-help, like get over my own poop when I started becoming an entrepreneur. We get hit over the head, just like you do in the corporate world. In the corporate world, it's more of like you get mentors and women's conferences and people that give you advice. And then you're like, okay, let me go do the advice. Well, in the entrepreneurial world, it's like that, only kind of on steroids, because there's always somebody to sell you a mastermind or a cheat sheet or a playbook. And for me, it was crazy because I was out there like super bold with my authenticity message, which is everything I believe in. And I was doing my keynote and I wrote my first book. Meanwhile, I was sitting in rooms, and one in particular when this came about, feeling totally overwhelmed and not, doing things with authenticity. I was taking the stuff 100% and then feeling paralyzed. So this rule first came about. I was sitting in a room in Nashville and we were learning about sort of the steps to build a speaking business. And they like rolled out the red carpet, like of the 87 page, PowerPoint document. Like, here you go. Like, you don't have to make all the
Smooth.
mistakes, right? Like,
Right.
step by step. Like, how golden is this? And I should have been thrilled. And the truth was, I was totally paralyzed. And was paralyzed, I'm thinking, okay, and this is very much me, but I know it's other people too, because I backed into the research and data. Like when we're just sort of given a list and told to do something, most of us don't do well, right? It just feels like, okay, it's about discipline, it's about hard work. And like, that's just not the most inspiring things. And so I remember sitting there, and then all of a sudden I said, well, what if you 50% rule it? What if you give yourself permission, like throw out half of this stuff? Because you're going to do it anyway, but why don't you do it with purpose? But then also then purposely replace it with your own stuff. And what happened, like I remember the feeling. It was like this overwhelmed dread immediately went to like excitement and, oh, what a good idea, Erin. And what if you did this? And it propelled me forward. So what I always tell people is great rule, but not enough to write a book about it. Like, so I went back and I would use it, but I would forget, I'll never forget. I took like this course on courses, Amy Porterfield's course. And like 2 months in, I'm like following it 100%. I'm recording videos. And then I'm like, you dummy, like use the 50% rule. Right. And so what happened is I started to use it more and more. And then just totally naturally, I felt like every time somebody, whether it was a client or a friend or whatever, would come to me with a problem, it would just like puke out my mouth. I'd be like, well, why don't you 50% rule it? And they would be like, huh? And I was like, okay, let me explain what it is. And I would watch them be unlocked and get excited. Still not enough to write a book though. It was just something I was using. And so this is years. This was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But then what happened a couple of years ago, using it time and time again, I started to see it out in the wild, and I started to see it everywhere. And what I mean by that is, for example, I went finally 2 summers ago and saw Hamilton, the Broadway musical. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, no shit. He 50% ruled Broadway. Like that's what he did, right? He took half of what's normal and half what's new. And what's so interesting about that story is that was not the first play, by the way, that Lin-Manuel Miranda added hip hop to. His first Broadway play, In the Heights, he did, but it was more expected. It was a modern day Latinx type community where you would expect hip hop. And so from that, I started to learn some of these mini lessons, like how important juxtapositions are when you mash together sort of 50% of each. But I started to see it with him. I saw it with Weird Al Yankovic. I was like, oh, wait a minute. He's the crappiest singer, but he's a megastar. Why?
Yeah.
He 50% ruled music. I saw it with the Savannah Bananas and Ted Lasso and all these examples. And what I realized is this rule isn't just a like get over your poop kind of thing. It's really the thing that helps you go kind of from almost unnoticed to unmatched is what I call it in a pithy way. It like helps you launch because people are craving new and fresh. They are not craving the same playbook. And that goes for executives too. People may necessarily know it consciously, but they're not craving the same dang playbook of that next leader that walks in. They want something that's a little more intriguing, that's a little bit more unique. People are dying for fresh and new. They want to be interrupted. They want the unexpected. And so that's when I became like obsessed with it. I'm so glad you're obsessed with it. That's when I was like, oh my God, this needs to be a book. And it needs to be like the shortcut language too that we all put out there, just constantly being, instead of being like, well, take my advice with a grain of salt, or you've got to innovate. It's like, just 50% rule it. And that's what, so many people that know about the rule and have read about the rule are doing. And I just want more people to 50% rule it.
I love this. And I think that your nature, you are somebody that comes across as very unexpected, that you almost buck status quo by nature. And so I wonder about practically applying the 50% rule when you are packed to the max. And so the thought of like doing something a little bit differently other than the playbook, which is what has been predictably beaten into your head of like, you come in with the agenda and the PowerPoint and it has to be done this way. How do you start to kind of find the room to start innovating and even having enough energy to be able to maybe say, this is old and crusty, it's no longer working, versus I just have energy to get through the day to kind of execute what I'm expected to execute. So how do you wedge your own? And essentially, it really is reconnecting with yourself and what works for you, and then applying it in a different way.
It's such a good question. I want to address the energy part first, and then the like how, what's the sort of secret behind the formula of the 50% rule?
What's the secret behind the secret?
Which I don't even know that I put this in the book, but we're just going to like give you all the secrets. Here's the thing around the energy. So I am always nervous. When I first started talking about authenticity, which is my sort of umbrella talk and brand, I was really nervous that people would just think it was a personality trait, right? And that was the thing that I most wanted to avoid. And I am so proud to say, after doing this for 6 years, that the way I teach authenticity, people can grab onto it and do it their own way.
Can you define authenticity? Can we pause? Because I think that your definition, authenticity, is such a buzzword and it's almost jargony, where it's like, yeah, I know, just be real. But you have a very different packaging. It's like a strategic way to do this that I think is really important for the listener to hear and understand.
Yeah. Let's talk about that first. And then we can go back to your great question about the energy to like be different and unexpected and all of this. Cause that's so important. I mean, people are so freaking busy and tapped. Yeah. Authenticity is not be yourself. It's not synonymous with transparency. The root word authentikos, which is Greek, of course, means to be genuine, but it also means to be original and authoritative. And authoritative, people get tripped on, call it competent. Or authoritative is sort of an old word, but it's really 3 things. It's genuine, original, and being competent. And I had to find that because when I left my corporate job, everybody kept saying, we're going to miss your authenticity, or we're going to miss your authentic leadership. But I remember thinking, like, I know I'm different, but I know I don't walk into work like I would walk into my friend's pool party, right? Like this be yourself. I knew there was something more nuanced. And once I understood the root word, which is this amalgamation and juxtaposition, I define it as authenticity as actually exposing who you are when people least expect it in the service of others. Authenticity is exposing who you are when people least expect it in the service of others. And that last part is so important because authenticity is actually not about you. If you want to be an authentic leader, or if you want to use authenticity in the workplace to not just feel better, but to sort of sell more stuff, get ahead, get noticed, have people want to work for you, it really is about doing those things that buck the norm, that are a little unexpected, that are more real, that aren't the playbook, that then gives permission to others to be like, oh, I actually want to listen to what she's saying because she's talking like a human in her email. Or oh my gosh, I'm going to actually execute on our plan because I went to her meeting and she told a story at the beginning and that inspired me instead of like put me to sleep with like the same bullet points. And so
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
think about it as a strategy to create connection and trust, but also a little bit of intrigue, right? A little bit of Colin Powell's once said, you know, you're a good leader when people follow you, if only out of curiosity. So really authenticity, when you do it, not for yourself, but you do it because you know that's what's needed for others. And that actually, back to your question about the 50% rule and how do you have the space and isn't it just easier to go through the playbook? Actually, I'll give you the secret tip and then I'll go back to the energy thing.
Okay.
The secret tip underlying all of this, whether it's being authentic or using the 50% rule, which is kind of an authenticity hack, is simply thinking, like, what would I want? Or what are people sick of? So we were just talking off record about my book tour and how it's called, well, it's a ridiculous name. It's the ridiculously authentic, rampantly extravagant tailgate book tour. And the reason I made it a tailgate tour, the big name was inspired by Weird Al because he'd had a weird name like that. So it's not because I'm like, oh, I want to be different. I want to be flashy. I want to stay. It's like, what are people sick of? What would I want? Like, I
Yeah.
don't feel like I have limited free nights. I don't want to spend one in a bookstore in a line waiting for somebody to sign something and read a passage without a drink. I'm sorry. I just don't, right? I want
Uh-huh.
something that's more laid back. So a lot of the secret behind all of this isn't to be in the mindset of like doing what's best for you, but actually thinking, wait, everybody else probably wants the same thing I do. So town hall, right? Everybody's thinking the same thing you are. Please, for the love of God, don't go through the same talking points, financial overview, kudos format that you've gone over, every quarter for the last 3 years. They're thinking, let's do something fun. Let's do something interactive. I'd love to hear a vulnerable story, right? So what are people craving? And it's probably the same thing you're craving. Back to the energy question, which is so important. So how do you find the time when you're just packed to the hilt? The reality is, I told that story about how as soon as I thought, what if you 50% rule, I got more excited, I got more motivated. And so when I was writing the book, I was like, oh, what if that's just I call it a personal pattern, a PP of Erin's, right? Like, what if that's just one of my nuances? But I dove into the data, and the truth is there's a study called the self-determination theory. Have you ever heard of
I
self-determination
haven't.
theory?
No.
It'll change your world. Well, so it's an entire theory, but there's this one experiment in particular that I write about in the book that stuck with me. And essentially what the self-determination theory, the end result is that people are way more motivated when they have autonomy, at least some form of autonomy in what they're doing, meaning they
Mm-hmm.
have a say. And the study they put two groups of people in a room to solve a puzzle. And of course, the people think they're watching them solve the puzzles, which is not really the study. What they did different in each room is one room they had 6 puzzles, but they said you have to work on these 3. And in the other room they said here's 6 puzzles, pick 3 of them that you have to solve. The study actually wasn't who finished first even. They finished their puzzles and then they sort of fake said, oh, we've got to go do something, feel free to do whatever you want while you wait, like for the next 10 minutes. And this is a long time ago, so they didn't have phones, so they had like magazines and whatever in both rooms. And what happened was in the room where they were able to select which puzzles they worked on, they actually picked those puzzles back up and started working on other ones. 50% more than they did in the other room. And so the motivation isn't just about in the meantime, because they had a goal, right? Like they had to work on 3 puzzles. So like they had something had to do. But when they didn't have anybody telling them what to do, they were more likely to do that. And so they did a number of studies, but it all pointed back to, this was back in the 70s where, everybody was like, people are motivated by money, period, end of story, right? Give them more money, they'll do more things. And they found that wasn't true. That this sense of autonomy and say was such a big motivator. So I would say you don't have the energy not to 50% rule things because you're going to be so miserable. It's going to feel like task. I mean, that's like my book tour. I did not do a book tour with my first one. I totally blamed it on COVID because it was February of 2021. The truth is, I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to get out the project plans and I didn't want to have to do the same thing everybody else did, but make sure I do as well, if not better. But as soon as I came up with my own idea and sort of said, okay, it's going to be a tour, but it's going to be tailgate themed, like I would work on it on Saturdays and Sundays, right? I was so excited. Created t-shirts and I did all this crap that I wouldn't have done before. And so, that's really the key is actually it's more motivating once you sort of constantly use this mantra of 50% rolling it.
Can I give a real life example of how I'm going to use this and why this is so important? Hey, it's Allison. Thanks for listening. Do you have a podcast idea that won't leave you alone? Maybe you know a podcast could be a game changer for your brand, for your business, or your visibility, but you're stuck on where to start. Well, good news. You don't have to figure it out alone. I'm offering a free, no strings attached strategy call to help you get clear on your podcast vision and what it could do for you. No BS, no pressure, just a real conversation about turning your ideas into something powerful. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Let's explore what's possible. Grab your free call now at allisonhair.com/free call. Can I give a real life example of how I'm going to use this and why this is so important? So as you know that I'm rebranding this podcast. So by the time this comes out, it'll be Reinvention Room. And I hired a podcast coach. So I have like all of the pieces in place. And there was a podcast coach that I've been watching for a while. I hired him just to make sure that I've got all the pieces in place to really do this right. I've changed my podcast name a number of times, and I want to make sure that in 6 months, I'm like, well, it's time to change again. And I hired this guy. It was a disaster. It was a total waste of money. And it was very unfinished and did what I asked him not to do, was to leave it in the messy middle, because that's what I hire people to help me through, is the messy middle. And so while I'm upset that it happened that way, I've actually taken the time for this coming weekend, where I'm going to actually go out of town by myself, and I'm going to 50% rule it. And I'm going to take the uninterrupted space that my husband was kind enough to afford me to unpack it and figure out, what does this need to look like? And that is how I'm applying it. So I'm hoping it'll be helpful.
I love it. And the key is just like strip it back to like, what is the intent? Not what is the playbook, what is the intent? And how do I take some of the stuff he gave you, even if it's unfinished, and be like, that's good stuff towards the intent. Like, I'm going to keep that. But keeping the intent in mind, and also keeping the listener in mind, who, by the way, likes things to be a little bit different sometimes and not the same formula, including for podcasts.
Yeah.
Like, how do you add your own Allison flair, things that have worked before or that you saw work well on Broadway or on YouTube or what have you, and have fun with it. So I'm so excited for you.
But I think the point of that is that I'm excited to build this in my own way and not feel like I'm beholden to an old playbook or something that generally we were going down a path that I didn't really feel connected to. And I kept saying, like, hold up, that it'll work, but I need to have like the beginning part be different.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing to kind of explore and maybe ask yourself the question that you talked about around, why is this not working? Why does this feel old? Why does this feel tired? Why does this feel like a drag for me to do? And what would it be like if it was more fun and more creative and more innovative? And I think about something we had talked about before we started recording. And I want you to unpack you had said, stop trying to be innovative and start being intriguing. What in the hell does that mean?
Yeah, I have been like screaming this inside and a little bit outside for probably the last couple of months. So first of all, my background, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are in similar situation. My background is corporate America, B2B, large sales, largely selling vaporware. I was in the healthcare insurance side of things, right? So we were selling services. We weren't selling widgets, right? We weren't selling computers, et cetera. And there's this bad dream I and others used to live in when I was back there. And I know it's only gotten worse in the 6 years since I've left. And that bad dream is sort of like, we all have some sort of recurring dream that's roughly like, you're trying to go to your college class and you can't find your notebook, right? And that anxiety of like, you can't even get out the door because you don't have like your shoes or your notebook. And that's sort of the recurring nightmare too in a lot of these companies, meaning it's not their notebook, it's their quote unquote innovation they're waiting for. So whether it's to go sell something new, even if you're not in sales, right? If you're in product ops, everybody's vested in like, we need to sell more business, right? Or it's even existing customers where you're like, I need to go tell them about the latest new innovation we're working on. And a lot of times you're like, shit, like that project is still in IT, the budget tripled from, 10 million to 30 million, or that innovation is going to come through us integrating with this third party and we haven't either finished the technical integration or we're still working on the workflow and it's delayed, and it's like this anxious, and you're just like, but I want to be different, I want to stand out, I want to sell more business, I want to grow, right? And like you're beholden to this innovation. And so many people don't realize that standing out isn't just about innovating on the what, but it's innovating on the how and being more intriguing. And so one of the things I talk about, and under the authenticity umbrella, under 50% rule, it all falls under this, using authenticity as a strategic advantage. And when I first started doing this, the first couple of years, it was the obvious was to build a better culture, I don't mean to say it like super snotty, but it was the HRE side of things, which is super important, right? Build your career, build your leadership, build your culture kind of track. Everybody wants a more authentic, workplace. And people try to pigeonhole me into authentic leadership. And I'm like, no. It's much more than leadership. It's how to stand out in your career, et cetera. But what I started talking more about, and now I'm actually working with companies doing, is it hit me like the same things, because it's the authenticity. What does it create? It creates connection. It's fast path to trust, and it creates sort of this intriguing differentiation. You're a little bit different. You're not the normal sort of robot. And so then I started also working a lot more with sales teams and externally facing, going the same things, the same techniques that I teach you, the framework I teach you to be more authentic that helps you internally is the same things that, of course, helps you externally build connections, trust, and intrigue / differentiation. And so that talk track has been something I've been doing for a couple of years, but the cravings really started. I get in these, like, I only do things, quite frankly, when it's like a gremlin crawling out of me. And I was like, like this spring, I was like, I'm a businesswoman at heart. Like I ran a major company. I was like, I want to get in there and show companies what I mean. I don't want to just do the keynote or do the workshops or do the coaching. I want to get in there. And so I did that this summer. I worked with about a 40-person insurtech startup in probably the most boring space ever. Sorry, but property and casualty insurance, which I don't even know much about. And they're in a subset of that. It's called excess and surplus, E&S.
Okay.
It's like gazillion-dollar market, but it's like, I'm sorry, but it's the boring of the boring. And they bought what I was putting down. I was so passionate, and they're like, we are going to our next round of funding. We know we need to grow exponentially. We have a great product, but we think we need more. And so I worked with them on this concept of creating an intriguing identity. An intriguing identity is not marketing fluff, but it's also not back end. It's like the flagpole that you can base everything around. It's sort of, so like the intriguing identity for my book event is the tailgate. So as soon as I came up with like identity or a theme, then everything else around that flagpole, people were like beer, yard games, trucks, like everything. And so I did the same with this company, and I dove into their business really deep, did tons of interviews, read lots of boring policies, looked at their system, and came up with 5 substantive things that they truly could differentiate around beyond like what they talk about today, which is the same thing their competitors. Like, we have fast integrated systems or whatever. And the one they picked was actually, I didn't think they would pick this, but it was the identity was taking the BS out of E&S. And it was crazy. I could not have orchestrated, Allison, a proof point to like, if you are intriguing, you're going to have people start coming to you. What happened was, while I was still finishing the project, the CEO decided to file for a registered trademark. An industry group involved in the E&S space saw that, posted it on LinkedIn. Their employees of this company got so freaking excited about it, started commenting on it. The gentleman I was working with asked them to pull back their comments because he's like, we're not even finalized. You're like, we're not even ready to roll this out. But then internally went and talked to them and they're like so super excited. And so the concept is it doesn't have to be innovation in the old sense. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just needs to be a little bit intriguing. It doesn't always have to be sassy. I mean, some of the things I proposed to them were like a theme of chess, but it was, something that you can rally around, that you can do differently. You can write your value proposition more authentically around. You can get people excited. You can start to think of offshoots. Like we started to ideate happy hours to gain new talent for them versus the normal HR processes. So yeah, I mean, I just really think that so many of these bad dreams can be solved or at least placated if people understand that authenticity is actually a strategy. And if you can use that to become more intriguing and sort of this whole theme, you can stand out without barely spending a dime. And I just want that for more companies because I know how bad that bad dream feels.
Yeah. What are you seeing as people start applying the 50% rule? And I'm thinking from certainly we have business owners that listen to this podcast, but I'm thinking about the individual
Yeah.
of are people quiet quitting? Are they opting out? Are they opting down? What does it look like to opt back in and be excited about it and get people
Yeah.
rallied around it? What are you seeing out there that could maybe help people stir the pot? As I know you're a professional pot stirrer.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is what I'm seeing first from, because I had a work group that supported the book launch for like 2 years. So I've had like real-time case studies coming into me all the time. And some are in the book. They're small to start. So the fun part about the book, I think, is like I think it's the fun stories around like, Hamilton and Weird Al
Yeah.
and all these, right? The big bang innovations, but that's not where people start. They start very small. I have a friend that I
Mm.
walk with often who's like a total addict of this book. Be little things like she's holding a conference and she's like, I hate those name tag things. I decided to 50% rule them. Like it's the tiniest things.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories was this woman, Jen, who's like had a meeting. She was new to the organization. She's in marketing. She had like a skip level meeting with the CMO. And her first inclination was like, I got to bring in a deck, right? Like, first of all, she's an executive. Second of all, I'm in marketing. I got to bring a pretty PowerPoint. And then because she was on the 50% rule project and team, she's like, no, what would I want? Back to that hack. She's like, I wouldn't want that. I just would want to have a conversation. And so she went into that meeting against sort of what felt comfortable without her whoopee blanket, if you will, of a,
Yeah.
a PowerPoint presentation and had a really good conversation. And she just wrote me, she finally announced, she's been telling me all along the way. She's like, that led me to being asked to be in certain rooms that were like way above my level. And that led me to being on a like top secret project. And then the top secret project, about a year after this meeting happened, just got announced last week on LinkedIn. And she was so excited that it was finally public. And she wrote me, she's like, it all started because I 50% ruled going into that meeting and thought like, I'm not going to do it normal. So it's little things like that, but they lead to bigger things. I think probably my favorite, most unexpected, it made me cry when I read it. So there are stories in the book of big famous people, but there are stories of everyday people in there from my book team. And this gentleman, Bill McCormick, so he had been an early adopter and he said all the things you'd want him to say, right? He's an entrepreneur. He's like, my business has changed dramatically because of the 50% rule, like all the sound bites. So he tells the story, he sort of submits it to me and I'm reviewing it and starting to edit. And the last paragraph just took my breath away. He said, what's crazier is that, so he's an older, white, evangelistic Christian male. And he said, since using the 50% rule, it's really made me stop. It's made me read new things. I used to sort of like poo-poo this whole woke thing. And now I take in other people's perspectives and see other sides of people. This is all before our crazy, like, oh my gosh, totally couldn't have predicted that. So I don't even know what we're going to see, but I think for your audience, start small. It can be dinner.
That.
It could be dinner tonight. It can be what you decide to do with your kids going to Sunday school. Maybe you 50% rule that because it's stressing you out. Start small, but you'll get addicted. And next thing you know, before you won't even know it's happening and you'll be doing it to really big stuff too.
I love it. What do you know that you wish other people could know?
I think I am so blessed to have been collecting data, quote unquote, for so long on how authenticity isn't for me, but how it helps me get noticed, get ahead, build relationships because of my father. So I had a father that's super authentic. He was a teacher for many years. Then he was a real estate agent, and didn't just used to. He's still like, he is a story machine. Ask my family. They're like, oh, okay, Papa's got another story. Like, oh, we've heard this one 3 times. But he would tell stories time and time again. First, when he was teaching, we'd sit around the dinner table, and they weren't like complaining. I mean, he went to a really like podunk school with a lot of less fortunate kids, and he could have come home and complained and told us and he didn't. He told us hilarious stories of the ways that he like 50% ruled or did more authentic teaching and switched it up. And so I was just lucky. I collected that data. And then I think when I went into my career, I had a good foundation and then just kept collecting it more. And so that just fuels me to do it. And I think, look, I got to be the CEO of a big company or big-ish company and do things that were well beyond what I was educated for or what I expected, or quite frankly, what I sacrificed to get. Like, so many people think it's sacrifice. And the reason was that I was intriguing, that I created connections. I had this fast pass, this concept of authenticity. So that's obviously my life's work. When I give a keynote and stuff, I'm always like, this is just a start. And I really want for them to have that level of trust and confidence that I got to have, so that they don't have to just work hard and sacrifice everything. It's just a better, easier way to do it. And that's through authenticity and the 50% rule.
I feel like you're shining such a bright light on possibilities that we may not have known were available to us. How do people reach you, find you, read your book, work with you?
Yeah. Well, so the best way, if you want to find me as like a real-ish person, I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'm like a loser because like that's my family. So if you could spell my name, you can find me. And then beauthenticinc.com. It's just the letter B, Authentic Inc. So I have lots of free resources. I have a free authenticity playbook. I have a quiz, some fun stuff. And then you can find both books there. My books are fun to read. I promise. They're not a slog. They're not a, 1, 2, 3, do this. Back to, what do I always do? What do I want? And what are people sick of? And when I wrote those books, there's nothing more important. I'm like, nobody needs another snoozy business book. So they're snarky, they're funny, they're metaphorical, they're ridiculous, but hopefully they're also impactful as well. So definitely
You're a storyteller, Erin. I love it. Thank you so much for your work, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I felt like the 50% rule was like a permission slip to ditch the PowerPoint, mix things up more, and stand out. What did it spark for you? You just need the right 50% of effort in the right places. And Erin Hatzikostas just gave us a playbook. I've linked all of her info in the show notes. And of course, you're going to need to go to my show notes because I don't even know if I spelled her name right, but I know I got the links right. And feel free to grab her book and slide into her DMs and say hello. Tell her I sent you. She is so personable and such a wealth of information. Now, if this conversation hit home, I would love for you to send this episode to a friend who's feeling the same way. And if you want more real talk conversation about what's next for you, why don't you schedule a free call with me at AllisonandHair.com/free call. And as I just said, it is free and there's nothing to lose, everything to gain. Because you deserve to be seen, you deserve to be heard, and you deserve a career that doesn't make you question your own brilliance. Thank you for hanging out with me in the Reinvention Room. I can't wait to see you next time.